Lyra Voss adjusted the stiffness of her ceremonial collar and tried not to scream. The collar was made of stiff woven gold, a material that looked magnificent under the photonic chandeliers of the imperial palace but felt like a strangling vine against the sensitive skin of her neck. As a junior protocol officer, her job was to be invisible, efficient, and flawlessly decorative. She was supposed to be part of the furniture, only with better posture and the ability to speak 12 galactic dialects. She stood near the entrance of the Hall of Ascendance, a cavernous room built from white marble and lined with pillars that stretched up toward a ceiling composed entirely of holographic stars. The air smelled of ozone and expensive perfume. It was the smell of power. A diplomat from the Rigel sector drifted past her, his robes trailing on the floor. He dropped an empty glass on a passing service drone without looking down. Lyra watched him go. Her eyes, a striking shade of violet that marked her off-world heritage, narrowed slightly. She muttered to herself, "I hope you trip on that hem, Your Excellency." Beside her, a senior protocol droid whirred softly. It rotated its head 180 degrees to face her. "Did you speak, Officer Voss?" the droid asked. "I was just admiring the textile work on the Rigel ambassador." Lyra lied smoothly. Her voice was calm, melodic, and completely convincing. It was the same voice she used to tell furious warlords that their seating arrangements were a mark of honor rather than an insult. The droid processed this and turned back to the door. The hall was filling up. This was the prelude to the Interstellar Unity Gala, the single most important event on the calendar of Aurelia Prime. It was a night of speeches, toasts, and backroom deals that would decide the fate of star systems. Lyra smoothed her uniform. She was 24 standard years old, and she had spent the last 3 of them learning that the Empire was a beautiful, rotten fruit. On the outside, it was golden and sweet. The news feeds played endless loops of charitable speeches given from the diamond balconies. They showed ships delivering grain to famine-struck moons. They showed the smiling faces of the royal family. But Lyra worked in the corridors. She saw the reality. She saw the way the Regency Council traded mining rights for silence. She saw how the Aurelia Defense Directorate approved orbital bombardments while sipping tea. She saw the Helix Consortium representatives walk into private meetings with briefcases full of patents and walk out with ownership over entire species' genomes. She checked her datapad. Her task list was 3 pages long. Check the microphone gain. Verify the wine temperature. Ensure the prince's security perimeter is unobtrusive. Prince Kale Seraphis. The name caused a ripple of movement near the high archway at the far end of the hall. The chatter died down, replaced by a hush that felt heavy and expectant. Kyle walked in. He was undeniably striking. He had the dark hair and sharp features of the Seraphis bloodline, with eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore the dress uniform of the High Command, black fabric cut with silver piping, and a sash of crimson silk across his chest. He moved with a predator's grace, controlled and precise. But Lyra knew where to look. She looked at his hands. They were clenched into fists at his sides, only relaxing when he realized people were watching. She looked at the set of his jaw. It was tight, locking away words he wanted to scream. He stopped in the center of the receiving line. A camera drone hovered near his face, broadcasting his image to 500 billion citizens. "We welcome our brothers and sisters from the Outer Rim," Kale said. His voice was deep, resonating through the hall. It was a perfect voice, trained by the best orators in history. "We stand together tonight not as masters and servants, but as partners in the great endeavor of peace." Lyra watched a Helix Consortium executive lean over to a general from the Defense Directorate. They were standing in the shadow of a pillar, 20 feet away from her. Partners. The Helix executive sneered softly. His skin was pale, almost translucent. That is a rich word for labor colonies. The general chuckled, a low, wet sound. Let him make his speeches. As long as he signs the appropriations bill for the new fleet, he can call them whatever he likes. Lyra looked down at her data pad. Her fingers tightened on the screen. This was the game. Kale was the face on the coin, shiny and noble, but the hands spending the coin were dirty. She turned away, feeling a familiar burn of indignation in her chest. She had taken this job believing she could help. She thought protocol was about communication, about bridging gaps between cultures. Instead, she was just a glorified usher at a funeral for morality. Officer Voss, a voice crackled in her earpiece. Report to Sector 4. We have a discrepancy in the refreshment manifests. On my way, Lyra replied. She slipped out of the main hall and into the service corridors. The walls here were plain gray metal, a sharp contrast to the marble outside. Servants and drones scurried back and forth, carrying trays of exotic hors d'oeuvres. Sector 4 was the staging area for the Royal Box Service. It was a high-security zone, guarded by 2 hulking soldiers in powered armor. They scanned Lyra's badge and stepped aside. Inside, the air was cold. Racks of wine bottles from Earth, Centauri brandy, and nectar from the cloud forests of Venus lined the walls. Lyra moved to the manifest console. The logistics computer was blinking red. She tapped the screen. The inventory count was off by 1 unit. A single bottle of reserve vintage had been logged as broken. But the weight sensors on the shelf indicated that something had been put back in its place. That is sloppy, she whispered. She walked over to the specific rack. It was the section reserved for the prince's personal toast. Kale Seraphis only drank one specific type of sparkling blue wine from the northern vineyards of the capital world. Lyra reached out to check the bottles. There were 6 of them. They looked identical. The blue liquid shimmered under the cold storage lights. Then she heard a noise. It came from the ventilation grid above her head. It was not the hum of a fan. It was a voice. The dosage is calibrated for his body mass, the voice said. It sounded distorted, metallic, as if coming through a scrambler. Lyra froze. She pressed herself against the wine rack, holding her breath. And the catalyst? A second voice asked. This one was smooth, cultured, already introduced to the glass. The first voice replied. The liquid itself is harmless until it touches the catalyst lining the interior of his ceremonial chalice. When he drinks, the reaction will be instantaneous. It mimics a cardiac event. No toxins will be found in the blood. A glass-black vial, the second voice murmured. Just as we discussed, the Helix Consortium sends its regards. Footsteps echoed on the metal grating above, fading away into the distance. Lyra stood there, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Assassination. They were going to kill the prince in front of the entire galaxy. She looked at the bottles. The plan was not in the wine. It was in the cup. The catalyst was in the cup. She checked the time. The grand toast was scheduled for 1900 hours. It was 1855. She had 5 minutes. Panic flared hot and bright in her mind. She should call security. She should alert the Royal Guard. But the voice had mentioned the Helix Consortium. Helix owned half the security contracts in the palace. If she called it in, the call might go straight to the people trying to kill him. She grabbed her data pad and ran. She burst out of the service corridor and back into the Golden Hall. The crowd was thicker now. Thousands of dignitaries were pressing toward the central dais where the prince stood. The noise was deafening, a roar of conversation, music, and clinking glass. Lyra pushed through a group of feathered delegates from the avian sector. "Excuse me, pardon me, official protocol business," she said, using her elbows more than her manners. She looked toward the dais. Cale was standing at the podium. A servant was approaching him carrying a golden tray. On the tray sat a single ornate chalice. It caught the light, sparkling with gemstones. The catalyst. It was in the cup. Lyra was 50 yards away. The servant was 10 yards away. She tapped her earpiece. "Security, this is Voss. We have a potential breach at the dais. Must stop the service." Static hissed in her ear. Then a voice cut in. "Negative. Voss. The channel is clear. Maintain silence." "They blocked me," she realized. "Or they are ignoring me." She saw the servant place the chalice on the podium. Kyle nodded his thanks. He reached out his hand. Lyra did not think. The logic centers of her brain shut down, overruled by a primal, terrifying instinct. She hiked up the hem of her uniform skirt and sprinted. She broke the protocol line. Security drone's word, tracking her sudden movement. "Halt!" a mechanical voice boomed. Lyra ignored it. She vaulted over a low velvet rope. She heard gasps from the crowd. A woman screamed. Kyle's fingers closed around the stem of the chalice. He lifted it. "Prince!" Lyra shouted. Her voice cracked, raw and desperate. Kale turned his head. He looked surprised, his eyes finding her in the chaos. For a second, time seemed to stretch into slow motion. She saw the confusion on his face. She saw the exhaustion beneath the mask. She saw a man who did not want to die, even if he hated his life. Lyra reached the podium. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't have proof. If she slapped the cup away, the liquid would splash, and if the catalyst was contact-based, it might still kill him. Or worse, she would be tackled before she could explain, and they would just pour him another drink later. She had to remove the threat. She lunged forward. Kyle flinched, stepping back, but he didn't strike her. He froze. Lyra grabbed the chalice from his hand. The motion spilled a few drops of blue wine onto her white gloves. She looked into the cup. The liquid swirled, innocent and deadly. "Don't," Kyle said, his voice low. Lyra looked at him. One look, intense, apologetic. She raised the chalice to her lips and drank. She drained it in 3 large swallows. The wine was cold. It tasted of berries and something else, something bitter, like copper and burnt sugar. She slammed the empty cup down on the podium. The entire hall went silent. 5,000 people held their breath. Lyra wiped her mouth. She stood there for 1 second, 2 seconds. Maybe they were wrong, she thought. Maybe it was a joke. Then the fire started. It began in her stomach, a sudden violent tearing sensation. It felt as if she had swallowed a grenade. The pain shot up her throat and down into her legs. Her vision blurred. The white marble floor tilted sideways. She heard a sound like rushing water in her ears. "Poison." She gasped. Her knees buckled. She fell. She did not hit the floor hard. Strong arms caught her. Kyle was there. He had dropped to his knees, catching her before she could collapse completely. He pulled her against his chest, disregarding the crimson sash, disregarding the cameras, disregarding the protocol he had followed his entire life. "Medic!" he roared. The sound tore through the silence of the hall like a thunderclap. "Get a medic up here." Lyra looked up at him. His face was swimming. He looked terrified. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you do that?" Lyra tried to speak, but her tongue felt heavy, swollen. She managed 2 words, glass, black, Then the darkness took her. The ballroom erupted. It was total bedlam. Security teams swarmed the stage, weapons drawn. Nobles screamed and trampled each other trying to reach the exits. The Helix Consortium representatives stood still, their faces carefully blank, watching the scene with cold calculation. Cale did not move. He held the unconscious girl in his arms, his white gloves stained with the blue wine that had spilled from her lips. He felt for a pulse in her neck. It was thready, fluttering like a moth wing against a window pane. "Stay with me," he commanded. "That is an order." Medical teams arrived in 10 seconds. They shoved the prince aside, not gently. They surrounded Lyra with scanners and anti-toxin injectors. "She is going into cardiac arrest," a medic shouted. "Initiate resuscitation protocols." Cale stood up. He was shaking. He looked at his hands. He looked at the empty cup. "Secure the hall!" he yelled to the royal guard. "No one leaves. No one." The cameras were still rolling. The image of the prince, disheveled and furious, standing over the fallen body of a junior officer, was beamed to every screen in the empire. The medical bay was a world of white light and terrifying silence. Lyra lay on a biobed in the center of the trauma unit. She was hooked up to 6 different machines. Tubes ran into her arms. A ventilator breathed for her, a rhythmic hiss-click that measured the seconds of her fading life. Kyle stood behind the observation glass. He had refused to leave. The Regency Council had sent 3 messages demanding his presence in the war room. He had deleted them all without reading. General Harkness of the Defense Directorate stood beside him. The general was a large man with a scar running down his left cheek. "Highness," the general said, his voice rough, "you must step away. The optics of this are complicated." Cale did not look at him. "She saved my life, General, or she staged it," Harkness said. Cale turned slowly. His eyes were cold enough to freeze nitrogen. "Explain yourself." "It is a classic maneuver," Harkness said, shrugging. "A nobody wants status. She arranges a fake threat, neutralizes it herself, and becomes a hero. We have found no trace of a shooter or an intruder, just a girl who drank some wine and fainted." Cale pointed at the monitor above Lyra's bed. "Look at her vitals, General. Does that look like fainting to you?" The monitor showed a graph that was spiraling downward. Her blood pressure was critical. Her cellular integrity was collapsing. The doctors inside the room were frantic. "Toxin levels are off the charts." A lead physician yelled, "We can't identify the compound. It is rewriting her neural pathways." Cale looked back at Lyra. She looked so small in the bed. Her skin had turned a pale, sickly gray. He remembered her face in the moment before she drank. There had been no calculation in her eyes, only fear and determination. "I want the cup analyzed," Cale said, "and I want every person who had access to the wine supply detained. We are already handling it." "Highness," Harkness said, "but you need to prepare a statement. The media is calling her a martyr. The opposition is calling her a plant. We need to control the narrative." "I don't care about the narrative," Cale snapped. "I care about the truth." He pressed his hand against the glass. Inside the room, the alarms changed pitch. It was a long, continuous tone. "She is flatlining," the physician screamed. "Charge the defibrillator. 400 joules, clear." The body on the bed convulsed as the electricity hit her. No response. Again. "Charge to 600. Cale watched, his breath caught in his throat. He felt a strange, sharp pain in his chest, as if the poison had touched him too. He didn't even know her name until an hour ago. Voss. Lyra Voss. Clear. Another jolt. Still the flatline. "Time of death," a nurse said, her voice trembling. 2100 hours and 14 minutes. Cale closed his eyes. He leaned his forehead against the cold glass. He had failed. He was the prince of 1,000 worlds, the master of the greatest military in history. And he couldn't save one girl who had jumped in front of a bullet meant for him. "Leave her," the physician said quietly. "Turn off the machines." The hum of the equipment died down. The room fell silent. Kyle turned to walk away. He needed to find who did this. He needed to burn them down. "Highness!" The shout came from inside the room. Kyle spun around. The monitor. The flat line. It twitched. A single spike, then another. "Impossible," the physician whispered. On the bed. Lyra's finger moved. The graph on the screen exploded into activity. But it wasn't the erratic, failing rhythm of a dying heart. It was strong, steady, powerful. Her blood pressure normalized in 3 seconds. Her oxygen levels shot up to 100%. The gray pallor of her skin vanished, replaced by a flush of color that was almost luminous. The wounds from the IV needles on her arms closed up before their eyes, knitting together without a scar. "What is happening?" Harkness demanded, stepping closer to the glass. "I don't know," the physician stammered. "The toxin, it is gone." "Gone?" Kyle asked. "Metabolized," the physician said, staring at his scanner. "No, not metabolized, neutralized. Her white blood cell count is increasing exponentially. It is attacking everything. The toxin, the sedatives, even the trace background radiation." Lyra Voss opened her eyes. They were not just violet anymore. They were glowing with a faint, iridescent light. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling without the help of the ventilator. She pulled the tube out of her throat with a calm, deliberate motion. She sat up. The doctors backed away, terrified. She looked at the glass. She looked straight at Cale. He stared back, mesmerized. She should be dead. By every law of biology and physics, she should be a corpse. Instead, she looked stronger than she had been before. Lyra looked at her hands. She flexed her fingers. She looked confused but alive. Kyle felt a chill run down his spine. It was not fear. It was awe. The assassination had failed, but something else had begun. The girl in the glass box was no longer just a protocol officer. She was something new, something impossible. And outside the door, the vultures were already circling. The Defense Directorate, the Regency, the Helix Consortium. They would all want to know how she survived. They would all want a piece of her. Cale made a decision then, a silent vow in the quiet of the observation deck. He hit the intercom button. "Lock the doors," he ordered. "Classification level Omega. No one touches her. No one speaks to her." He looked at General Harkness. "This never happened, General. She is still in critical condition. Do you understand?" Harkness looked at the girl sitting up on the bed, looking around with bright, intelligent eyes. He nodded slowly. "Understood, Highness. But you cannot hide a miracle forever." "I know," Kyle said softly. He watched Lyra swing her legs over the side of the bed. She looked wobbly, but she stood up. She was alive. She drank the poison meant for him. And now, she was the most dangerous thing in the universe. The ceiling was white, not the soft, comforting white of a cloud or fresh snow, but the aggressive, blinding white of a sterile laboratory. It hummed with a frequency that made Lyra Voss's teeth ache. She blinked, expecting the grit of death in her eyes. Instead, her vision was impossibly sharp. She could see the microscopic texture of the ceiling tiles. She could hear the rhythmic thrum of a ventilation fan 3 rooms away. She took a breath, and the air tasted like ozone and recycled nitrogen. She sat up. There was no pain. The tearing fire that had ripped through her stomach in the ballroom was gone. In fact, every ache she had ever known, the stiff shoulder from long protocol shifts, the chronic fatigue of double duties, was gone. She felt vibrant, electric. She looked down. She was wearing a bio-weave gown, gray and formless. Her arms were free of tubes, but the skin where the needles had been was smooth and unblemished. "You are awake." The voice came from the wall. A panel slid open, revealing a glass partition. Behind it stood 3 figures in hazmat suits. The one in the center stepped forward, pressing a gloved hand against the barrier. "I am Dr. Aris," the figure said. The voice was muffled but audible. "Please remain calm. You are in the high containment wing of the Imperial Medical Institute." Lyra swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her bare feet touched the cold floor. "Am I dead?" she asked. "No," Aris replied. "That is the problem." Lyra walked toward the glass. The hazmat suits flinched. They were terrified of her. "Problem?" Lyra asked, tilting her head. "I saved the prince. I drank poison. I should be a hero or a corpse. Why am I in a cage?" "You are not in a cage," Aris said, though his eyes darted to the heavy magnetic locks on the door. "You are under quarantine. The substance you ingested was a binary neurotoxin of unknown origin. It has a lethality rate of 100%. It liquefies internal organs within 40 seconds. "I remember the pain," Lyra said quietly. "It stopped," Aris said. He tapped a holographic slate in his hand. "We have run the scans 5 times. The toxin entered your system and began the degradation process. Then, your cellular structure adapted. Adapted? It did not just fight the poison. Officer Voss, it consumed it. Your white blood cells dismantled the molecular bonds of the toxin and converted it into energy. You didn't neutralize the threat. You ate it." Lyra looked at her hands. They looked the same, but they felt different. Stronger. "We introduced a mild sedative gas into this room 10 minutes ago to keep you asleep," Aris continued. "Your body filtered it out of the air before it reached your lungs. We tried a contact paralytic on your skin while you were unconscious. Your epidermis neutralized it on contact." He lowered the slate, his voice dropping to a whisper that barely made it through the intercom. "This is impossible. It looks like the Lazarus markers from the banned trials. But those were destroyed 50 years ago." The scientist to his left nudged him sharply. Aris flinched and straightened up, clearing his throat. "Forget I said that. The point is, you are a medical anomaly. We cannot release you until we understand what you are." "I am a junior protocol officer," Lyra said, her voice hardening. "And I want to see the prince." "That is not possible," Aris said. "You are a biological hazard level 5. The door to the observation room hissed open behind the scientists. A tall figure in a black military coat stepped in. The scientists scrambled out of the way, bowing low. It was Kale. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his gray eyes, and his uniform was wrinkled, as if he had not slept since the gala. He walked up to the glass, ignoring the doctors. "Leave us," Kale ordered. "But Highness," Aris protested, "the contagion risk. Get out." The command was absolute. The scientists scurried out of the room, the door sealing shut behind them. Kale looked at Lyra through the thick glass. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy with the memory of the ballroom, the chaos, the poison, the way he had held her as she died. "You look terrible," Lyra said. Kale let out a short, startled laugh. It was a rusty sound. "I look terrible? You drank a cup of liquid death in front of half the galaxy, died on a table and woke up glowing. I think I am allowed to look a little tired." Lyra walked closer to the glass. She placed her hand against it. Cale hesitated, then placed his hand on the other side, matching her palm. The glass was 3 inches thick, but the connection felt immediate. "I thought I lost you," Cale said softly. His voice lacked the princely cadence she was used to. It was just a man's voice. "You almost did," Lyra replied. "Why didn't you let me die? Because I am selfish," Kyle said. "And because I do not like owing debts. You saved my life." "It was my job," Lyra said. "Well, technically my job is seating arrangements and translation. But the job description says ensure the comfort and safety of the royal family. I suppose dying counts." Cale smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was a shadow there. "You are not safe here." "Lyra, I gathered that from the hazmat suits," she said. "They look at me like I am a bomb." "You are not a bomb," Cale said. "You are a map, and everyone wants to read you." He stepped back, pacing the small observation room. "The Defense Directorate has already petitioned the Council. They want to classify you as a strategic asset class Alpha. That is military speak for a living weapon. They want to know if they can replicate your blood to make soldiers who can walk through nerve gas." Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "I am not a soldier. Then there is the Helix Consortium," Cale continued. "They have lawyers in the lobby right now. They are claiming that since the poison was technically a proprietary compound, the antibodies your body created are their intellectual property." "That is insane," Lyra snapped. "That is the law," Cale corrected. "Or at least, the version of the law they pay for." "And the Regency?" "My own council. They want to put you in protective royal custody." "That sounds better than the other two," Lyra said. "It is not," Cale said sharply. "It means you become a bird in a golden cage. You would live in the palace, yes. You would have silk sheets and fine food. But you would never leave. You would be a symbol of divine favor, trotted out for speeches and then locked away at night so they can study you. Ownership. Lyra. It is all ownership." Lyra crossed her arms. Her fear was beginning to curdle into anger. She was known for her sharp tongue in the protocol office, a trait that had kept her from promotion but earned her the respect of the lower staff. "So my options are, become a lab rat for the army, a patent for a corporation, or a pet for the throne." "Essentially," Cale said. Lyra looked him in the eye. "I want hazard pay," she said. Cale blinked. "What?" "Hazard pay," she repeated. "Retroactive to the moment I jumped that velvet rope. And a lifetime budget for desserts. High-quality ones, not the synthetic nutrient paste they serve in the mess hall." Cale stared at her for a second, and then he laughed again. This time it was genuine. It transformed his face, smoothing out the lines of stress and making him look years younger. "You are facing life imprisonment and vivisection, and you are negotiating for pastries?" "A girl has to have priorities, Highness," Lyra said, offering him a small, crooked smile. "If I am going to be the most valuable object in the Empire, I expect to be fed accordingly." Cale stopped laughing. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "You are not an object. Lyra, I will not let them make you one." The playful atmosphere vanished, replaced by a charged silence. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people realize they are standing on the edge of a cliff together. "I don't know if you have a choice," Lyra whispered. "You are the prince, but you are trapped too." Cale looked away, his jaw tightening. "I am working on it, but you need to be careful. The tests, they are going to escalate. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Trust no one but me." "I trust you," Lyra said. The words came out before she could check them. Kyle looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "Hold on to that," he said. "You are going to need it." The next 2 days were a blur of needles, lights, and invasive questions. Lyra was moved from the recovery room to a secure testing facility. The walls were lined with sensors. She was subjected to heat, cold, and various chemical mists. Each time, her body shrugged off the assault with terrifying efficiency. She didn't just survive, she thrived. It was as if her biology was bored and welcomed the challenge. On the third morning, the sharks arrived in person. The first visitor was General Harkness. He did not come to the glass partition. He came inside the room, wearing a portable rebreather mask. He threw a data pad onto Lyra's bed. "Sign this," he grunted. Lyra picked it up. It was an enlistment form, backdated 3 years. It would make her property of the Aurelia Defense Directorate. "I am a civilian, General," Lyra said, sliding the pad back. "You are a national security resource," Harkness barked. "We are at war with 3 separatist systems. Do you know how many of my men die from biological agents? Your blood could save millions. Are you selfish enough to deny them that?" "I am not denying anyone help," Lyra said calmly. "I am denying you ownership of my body, and there is a difference." Harkness leaned in, his eyes hard. "You think the prince can protect you? He is a boy playing at politics. When the real decisions are made, he does what he is told. Sign the paper, Voss, or we will find a way to draft you that involves a lot less paperwork and a lot more pain." He stormed out. An hour later, a woman in a sleek silver suit entered. She introduced herself as Director Vane of the Helix Consortium. She did not wear a mask. She smiled, revealing perfect white teeth. "My dear," Vane purred, "the General is such a brute, isn't he? We offer a much more civilized arrangement." She held up a holographic contract. It shimmered in the air. "Voluntary partnership," Vane read. "You provide biological samples on a weekly basis. We provide you with a penthouse in the Spire, a generous stipend, and 10% of the royalties from any vaccines derived from your genome. It is a life of luxury." Lyra read the fine print floating at the bottom. Clause 84. She read aloud. "The subject agrees to restrict movement to designated helix zones. The subject agrees to forego reproductive rights to prevent unauthorized genetic propagation. The subject agrees that all tissues, fluids, and organs are the sole property of Helix Consortium in perpetuity." She looked up at Vane. "You want to patent my children before they are even born?" "We are protecting our investment," Vane said, her smile not wavering. "Business is business, darling. Get out," Lyra said. Vane's smile vanished. "You are making a mistake. The alternative to partnership is not freedom. It is extraction. And we are very good at extraction." By evening, Lyra was exhausted. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the blank white wall. The reality of her situation was sinking in. She had immunity to every poison in the universe. But she had no immunity to greed. They were going to tear her apart. The lights in the facility dimmed to a low blue setting for the night cycle. The hum of the ventilation system slowed. Lyra lay down, pulling the thin thermal blanket up to her chin. She closed her eyes, trying to sleep. She heard a click. It was the sound of the magnetic lock on her door disengaging. Lyra sat up. "Cale," she whispered. The door slid open. It was not Cale. It was a medical technician, a young man she had seen checking the monitors earlier. He was pushing a cart with a tray of vials. He looked nervous. He was sweating. "Time for your evening supplement," he muttered, not making eye contact. "I didn't order a supplement," Lyra said, swinging her legs out of bed, and the doctors said no more tests until morning. "Doctor's orders," the technician said. He reached for a syringe on the tray. It was filled with a clear, viscous liquid. Lyra stood up. Her instincts, sharpened by whatever change had happened in her blood, were screaming at her. "Who signed the order?" she demanded. "Just sit down," the technician hissed. He lunged at her. He was fast, but Lyra was faster. She sidestepped, grabbing his wrist. The contact sent a jolt of shock through him. He wasn't just nervous, he was terrified. She twisted his arm. The syringe fell to the floor. It didn't break. "Who sent you?" Lyra asked, her voice low and dangerous. The technician whimpered. "They said you wouldn't feel it. They said it would look like a delayed reaction to the toxin." "Who?" "The Regency. No, the Helix." "I don't know. They paid me in credits masked through 3 shell accounts." He pulled free from her grip and scrambled backward. He pulled a small stun baton from his belt. "I have to do it," he cried. "They will kill my family." He swung the baton. It hit Lyra in the shoulder. 10,000 volts discharged into her body. It should have knocked her unconscious. It should have convulsed her muscles. Instead, it tickled. Lyra looked at the baton, then at the technician. Her body absorbed the electricity, grounding it instantly. She felt a surge of energy, like a strong cup of coffee. "Is that it?" she asked. The technician dropped the baton and ran. He bolted out the door and down the hallway. Lyra stood alone in the room. She looked at the syringe on the floor. Someone wanted her dead before she could be used. Or maybe one faction wanted to deny the others the prize. The alarm klaxons began to wail. "Security breach in Sector 4. A computerized voice announced. "Lockdown initiated." Lyra backed away from the door. She was trapped. If security came, they would blame her. They would say she attacked the technician. The door hissed again. Lyra grabbed the metal tray from the cart, holding it like a shield. "Come in and I will dent your skull," she shouted. A figure stepped through the door. It was Cale. But he wasn't wearing his uniform. He was wearing dark civilian tactical gear, black on black. He had a hood pulled up. "Put down the tray." "Lyra," he said. "Cale?" She lowered the tray. "They tried to kill me. A technician." "I know," Cale said. "I saw him running on the monitors. I disabled the camera feed to this room 30 seconds ago, and we have to go. Now. Go where? The hallway is locked down." Cale stepped inside and hit a panel on the wall. The door slid shut and locked. "Not the hallway," he said. He walked over to the back wall, where a large disposal chute was embedded in the metal. It was meant for hazardous waste. "You are joking," Lyra said. "It leads to the sub-basement laundry processing," Kyle said, prying the panel open. "It is the only route that doesn't have biometric scanners." Lyra looked at the dark, narrow hole. Then she looked at Cale. "This is a kidnapping, isn't it?" she asked. "It is a transfer," Cale said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Unauthorized, indefinite, and highly illegal. But yes." He offered her his hand. "Are you coming?" Lyra took his hand. It was warm and solid. "I hope you know where we are going," she said. "Away from here," Cale replied. He pulled her into the chute. They slid down into the darkness. They landed in a pile of sterile linens in the basement. The air was hot and smelled of industrial detergent. Cale was on his feet instantly, helping Lyra up. "Keep your head down," he whispered. They moved through the labyrinth of the palace underbelly. These were the tunnels used by the service drones and the maintenance crews, the arteries of the empire that the nobility pretended didn't exist. Cale moved with surprising confidence. "You know your way around the servant tunnels very well for a prince," Lyra noted, keeping pace with him. I used to hide down here when I was a child, Kyle said quietly. When the tutors and the protocols became too much, it was the only place where I could be invisible. They reached a service elevator. Kyle hacked the keypad with a small device he pulled from his pocket. The doors opened. Inside, the space was cramped. They stood shoulder to shoulder as the elevator ascended. The proximity was overwhelming. Lyra could smell the leather of his jacket and the faint scent of sandalwood soap. She could feel the heat radiating from him. In the medical bay, there had been glass between them. Now, there was nothing. Cale looked down at her. His eyes searched her face. "Are you all right?" he asked. "That technician?" "He didn't hurt me," Lyra said. "The stun baton didn't work. Nothing works on me anymore." She said it with a mix of wonder and fear. "I am a monster, Kyle. I am a freak." Kyle shifted. He turned his body toward her, boxing her in against the wall of the elevator. It wasn't threatening, it was protective. He raised a hand, his fingers hovering inches from her cheek, afraid to touch but wanting to. "You are not a monster," he said fiercely. "You are the only real thing I have seen in this palace in 20 years. Lyra's breath caught. She looked up at his lips. The air in the elevator felt suddenly thin. "Kyle." He leaned in. The distance between them closed to a whisper. "We are almost at the surface," he said, his voice rough. "Once we leave the palace grounds, I am not the prince anymore. I am just a fugitive. And you are the target." "I can handle myself," Lyra said. "I know," Kyle whispered. "That is what terrifies me." The elevator shuddered to a halt. The doors opened. They were in a hangar bay. A sleek, unmarked transport skiff sat waiting, its engines humming. Kyle grabbed her hand again, lacing his fingers through hers. "Run," he said. They sprinted across the hangar floor, behind them. The service elevator dinged, and shouts echoed from the tunnel. Security had found them. "Get in!" Cale shouted, shoving Lyra toward the cockpit. She jumped in. Cale vaulted into the pilot's seat. He slammed the throttle forward. The skiff shot out of the hangar bay, smashing through the atmospheric containment field. They burst out into the night sky of Aurelia Prime. Below them, the glittering city spread out like a sea of diamonds. Behind them, the alarms of the Imperial Palace screamed into the night. Lyra looked at Cale. He was focused on the controls, his profile sharp against the lights of the dashboard. He had given up everything, his title, his safety, his home, in the span of 10 minutes. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The Undercity," Kyle said, banking the ship hard to the left to dive into the neon canyons of the lower districts. A place where the cameras don't look. Lyra looked out the window. She was immune to poison. She was immune to electricity. But looking at the man beside her, she realized she was not immune to everything. She was in trouble. And for the first time, it wasn't the kind she could shrug off. The descent into the Undercity was not just a change in altitude. It was a change in atmospheric pressure, morality, and light. The skiff Cale had stolen was a high-performance interceptor. But down here, in the bowels of Aurelia Prime, it was just another piece of expensive trash waiting to be stripped for parts. They ditched it in a magnetic scrapyard 3 levels below the sanitation line, covering it with a tarp that smelled of fermented coolant. Lyra Voss stood on the edge of the walkway, looking out at the sprawl. Up above, the Imperial City was a vision of white marble and gold filigree, bathed in eternal artificial sunlight. Down here, it was the neon black. The darkness was heavy, tangible, broken only by the aggressive, flickering advertisements for illicit cybernetics, synthetic gin, and hour-by-hour motels. The rain here didn't fall from clouds. It dripped from the waste pipes of the aristocracy miles overhead, filtering down as a greasy, acidic mist that coated everything in a slick sheen. Kale Seraphis stood beside her. He had ditched his military coat, trading it for a rough canvas jacket they had found in the skiff's emergency locker. He had rubbed grease on his face to hide the perfect, pampered texture of his skin, but he still stood like a prince. His spine was too straight. His chin was held at an angle that expected obedience. "You stick out," Lyra said, pulling her hood up. "You walk like you own the pavement." "I technically do," Kyle replied, his voice low. "The Seraphis family holds the deed to the entire planet." Lyra laughed, a harsh sound that matched the grinding of the mag trains overhead. "Down here, the only thing you own is what you can hold in your hands or keep in your head. Slouch a little, and for the sake of the stars, stop making eye contact. In the palace, eye contact is politeness. Here, it is a threat." Kale slumped his shoulders, an unnatural motion for him. "Like this?" "Better," Lyra said. "Now follow me. And if anyone asks, you are my bodyguard. You are mute, and you are slightly unhinged." "I feel slightly unhinged," Kale muttered. They navigated the labyrinth of alleyways. The crowd was a dense river of humanity and aliens. A 6-armed dock worker shoved past Kale. A group of street kids with glowing implants watched them from the shadows. The air throbbed with the bass of a dozen underground clubs. They reached a building that looked like it had survived a bombardment. The front door was a sheet of rusted steel covered in holographic graffiti. Lyra hammered a rhythm on the metal. 3 fast, 2 slow, 1 heavy thud. A camera lens extended from the wall on a robotic arm. It scanned Lyra's retina with a red laser. Voice recognition required. A synthesized voice droned. Lyra leaned in. "Password is, the Emperor wears synthetic underwear." The door hissed and unlocked. They stepped into a chaotic apartment that smelled of soldering iron and spicy noodles. Cables snake across the floor like a nest of vipers. Screens covered every inch of the walls, scrolling through streams of code, surveillance feeds, and stock market data. A figure spun around in a swivel chair. Rook was a masterpiece of chaotic modification. He was human, technically, but his left arm was entirely mechanical, stripped down to the brass gears, and his hair was dyed a violent shade of electric blue. He wore a headset around his neck and a t-shirt that read, "System failure in 3 forbidden languages." "Lyra!" Rook shouted, leaping up. He didn't hug her. He scanned her with a handheld device. "No trackers. Good. You are clean." He looked at Kale. He paused. He squinted. Then his jaw dropped. "No way," Rook whispered. "You brought the prince, and you brought the actual prince to my squat. This is either the best day of my life or I am going to be executed in 20 minutes. "Rook, this is Kale," Lyra said. "Kale, this is Rook. He is annoying, but he is the best data diver in the sector." Kale extended a hand. "A pleasure." Rook stared at the hand. "I am not touching that. I have seen where those hands have been on the news. Shaking hands with dignitaries. Signing treaties. It is too much pressure." He spun back to his screens. "Also, you two are the most wanted people in the galaxy right now. Do you know what the bounty is? 500 million credits. Each. I could sell you out and buy a moon." "You won't," Lyra said, walking over to his console. "Because you hate the Regency more than you love money." "True," Rook admitted. He tapped a few keys. "Look at this. I pulled it from the deep web 10 minutes ago." A file opened on the main screen. It was heavily redacted, black bars covering most of the text. But the header was clear. Project Aegis Lazarus. The file Lyra saw in the palace. Kale said, stepping closer, living countermeasures. Rook read, scrolling down. This dates back 50 years. The Empire was terrified of biological warfare from the Outer Rim Coalition. They wanted a soldier who couldn't get sick, someone who could walk into a plague zone and kill everyone without coughing. They messed with the genome, tried to fuse human DNA with tardigrade resilience and something else, something alien. They shut it down, Kale said. My grandfather signed the termination order. It was deemed unethical. Rook snorted. Unethical projects don't get shut down, Highness. They get renamed. They buried Aegis Lazarus in the archives, but look at the recent pings. He pointed to a timestamp. 3 weeks ago, someone accessed the dormant files. The access code originated from a Helix Consortium node. Helix, Lyra said, feeling a cold knot in her stomach. They knew. That is why they had the contract ready. They knew what I was before I did. We need the unredacted files, Kale said. We need to know who authorized the restart. I can't get them from here, Rook said. The encryption is military grade, quantum locked. If I try to crack it remotely, they will fry my brain through the headset. So we need physical access, Lyra said. Rook grinned. It was a sharp, dangerous expression. There is a Helix secure data vault in the mid-levels. It is disguised as a high-end sensory club called the Kaleidoscope. It is where the executives go to launder their credits and store their dirty secrets. The server room is in the penthouse. We can't just walk in, Kale said. No. Rook agreed. But the Kaleidoscope is hosting a private gala tonight for the consortium board. They have hired external entertainment, acrobats, dancers, illusionists. He tapped a key. I just intercepted the booking confirmation for a duo called the Celestial Twins. They are stuck in customs at the orbital border. I made sure of it. Lyra looked at Kyle. Kale looked at Lyra. No. Kale said, yes. Lyra said, 2 hours later, Prince Kale Seraphis was wearing a skin-tight suit of shimmering silver scales and a mask that covered the upper half of his face. He looked ridiculous. He looked magnificent. Lyra was dressed in a matching outfit, though hers involved significantly less fabric and a pair of gravity boots that allowed her to hover 3 inches off the ground. I hate this, Kale hissed as they stood in the service elevator of the Kaleidoscope. You look dashing, Lyra whispered, adjusting his mask. Just remember the cover. You are mute. You are the muscle. I do the talking. I do the floating. You lift me up and look mysterious. The elevator opened. The club was an assault on the senses. The walls were made of liquid crystal that shifted color with the music. The air was thick with scented smoke, jasmine and opiates. The elite of the Helix Consortium lounged on floating divans watching a holographic light show. Lyra glided into the room. She didn't walk. The gravity boots made her movements fluid, dreamlike. She spun, the silver scales catching the light. Kyle followed, his movements stiff but powerful. To the drunken executives, his tension looked like performance art. He looked like a coiled spring. They moved toward the VIP section. Rook's voice crackled in their hidden earpieces. You are doing great. Turn left. The lift to the server room is behind the bar. You need a retinal key from a senior executive. Lyra scanned the room. She spotted Director Vane, the woman who had tried to buy her in the hospital. Vane was sitting with a heavy-set man who was laughing too loudly. Target acquired, Lyra whispered. She floated over to their table. She spun in the air, landing lightly on the edge of their divan. Vane looked up, her eyes glazed with expensive stimulants. Do we know you? Vane slurred. Lyra bowed. We are the entertainment. Would you like to see a trick? She signaled Kale. He stepped forward. He grabbed Lyra by the waist and lifted her effortlessly over his head. It was a standard acrobatic move, but Cale's strength made it look like he was lifting a feather. While Vane watched Cale, Lyra's hand moved. She swiped a glass of champagne from the table and deliberately tipped it. "Oh," Lyra cried. The liquid splashed onto Vane's lap. "You clumsy idiot!" Vane shrieked, jumping up. "I am so sorry," Lyra said, grabbing a napkin. She began to dab at the dress, her hands moving frantically. "Get off me." Vane pushed her away. Lyra stepped back, bowing apologetically. Cale grabbed her arm and pulled her away before security could intervene. "Did you get it?" Cale whispered as they retreated toward the bar. Lyra opened her hand. A thin, transparent film sat on her palm. She had lifted Vane's retinal contact lens right out of her eye while pretending to clean the dress. "Gross, but effective," Lyra said. They reached the private lift. Lyra pressed the film against the scanner. Access granted. The doors slid open. They stepped inside. The noise of the club vanished, replaced by the humming silence of the secure floor. The server room was cold. Rows of black monoliths stood like tombstones, pulsing with blue light. "Rook, we are in," Lyra said. "Find the central terminal," Rook said. "Plug in the drive I gave you. I will do the rest." They ran to the main console. Lyra jammed the data spike into the port. On the screen, a progress bar appeared. 20%. Kyle stood guard at the door. "I have a bad feeling," he said. "It is too quiet." 40%. Suddenly, the lights in the room turned red. "Intruder alert," a calm voice announced. "Sterilization protocol initiated." The vents in the ceiling slammed open. A thick, yellow gas began to pour into the room. "Gas!" Cale shouted. He pulled his mask down, trying to cover his mouth. "Rook!" Lyra yelled. "We are blown! I need 30 seconds!" Rook shouted in her ear. "Don't pull the drive!" The gas hit the floor and began to rise. Cale started to cough. He fell to his knees. "It's neurotoxin," he wheezed. His eyes watered. His skin began to burn. Lyra looked at the gas. She took a breath. Nothing happened. She felt a slight tingle in her lungs, a warmth in her blood as her immune system identified the threat, analyzed it, and dismantled it. It tasted like lemon and sulfur. She looked at Cale. He was curling into a ball, gasping for air. He was dying. Lyra didn't hesitate. She grabbed Cale by the collar of his silver suit. "Stand up," she commanded. "I can't." Cale choked. Lyra looked at the console. 60%. She couldn't leave the drive. She couldn't leave Kyle. She grabbed Cale's face. "Look at me." Cale's eyes were rolling back. He looked at her. He saw her standing in the swirling yellow cloud, breathing deeply, her skin glowing with that faint, impossible iridescence. She looked like a goddess of war. She looked terrifying. "Hold your breath," Lyra said. She kissed him. It wasn't romantic, son, it was resuscitation. She forced her own air, clean, filtered, immune air into his lungs. Cale's eyes widened. The burning in his chest subsided slightly. Lyra pulled back. "I am going to finish this. Stay down." She walked through the gas. It swirled around her legs. She reached the console. 90%. The door to the server room blasted open. 3 security guards in full hazmat gear stormed in, rifles raised. They saw Lyra standing in the middle of the kill zone, unmasked, looking bored. "Freeze!" one guard shouted, his voice amplified. Lyra looked at the screen. 100%. She yanked the drive out. She turned to the guards. "You guys are late," she said. She threw the data drive to Cale. "Catch!" Cale caught it. Lyra sprinted at the guards. She didn't have weapons, but she had the element of total surprise. They expected a choking victim. They got a whirlwind. She slid under the first rifle barrel, kicking the guard's knee. The joint snapped with a sickening crunch. She grabbed the second guard's air hose and yanked it free. He panicked as the yellow gas rushed into his suit. The third guard fired. The stun round hit Lyra in the chest. She absorbed the impact, staggered back one step, and then smiled. "Tickles," she said. She punched him in the faceplate. The glass cracked. Cale watched from the floor. He saw her violence. He saw her power. And for the first time, he saw the horror of what she could become. She was unstoppable. She was a weapon. And she was beautiful. The ventilation system reversed, sucking the gas out. Rook had overridden the building controls. "Get to the roof," Rook shouted. "I have a drone extraction inbound." The safe house was a derelict water treatment station on the outskirts of the district. It was damp, cold, and smelled of rust. Lyra sat on a crate, wiping the silver makeup from her face. She was shaking. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her cold and empty. Kyle paced the room. He was still wearing the torn silver pants of his costume. He looked agitated. He stopped in front of her. "You walked through it," he said. "It was ZX5 nerve gas. I know the smell. It kills in minutes. You breathed it like it was fresh air." Lyra didn't look up. It tasted like lemons. Cale grabbed her shoulders. He wasn't gentle. "Do you understand what I saw back there? You tore through those men when you absorbed a stun round. You are—" "What?" Lyra snapped, jerking away from him. "A monster? A freak? Go ahead, Highness. Say it." "Valuable," Cale said. The word hung in the air like smoke. Lyra stood up. Her eyes flashed violet fire. "Is that all I am? Valuable?" "No!" Cale shouted. "That is not what I mean. I mean that the Empire will burn worlds to get you back. I saw you today. Lyra, you are not just a girl anymore. You are a power, and power attracts tyrants." He ran a hand through his hair. "I watched you fight, and for a second, just a second, I thought about how useful you would be to the throne. I thought about how I could use you to end the war." He looked at her, his eyes full of shame, "And I hate myself for it. I am just like them." Lyra looked at him. She saw the conflict in his face, the prince fighting the man. She stepped closer. She poked him in the chest, hard. "You are not like them," she said. "Because you told me. You admitted it. They would just put a collar on me and call it patriotism. You are afraid of what you might do. That is the difference." She grabbed his lapels. "But listen to me, Cale Seraphis. I am not a resource. I am not a miracle. I am Lyra. I like spicy noodles. I hate wearing heels. I cry when I see old animals. I am a person, and if you ever look at me and see a weapon again, I will walk away." "I see you," Cale whispered. "I see Lyra." The space between them vanished. This wasn't the practical life-saving kiss from the gas chamber. This was desperate. It was angry. Cale kissed her like he was drowning. Lyra kissed him back with a ferocity that matched the fire in her blood. It was a collision of two people who had been stripped of everything but each other. His hands tangled in her hair. Her hands gripped his arms, feeling the muscle beneath the skin. It felt dangerous. It felt like treason. The prince and the protocol officer, the owner and the owned. But in that dark, rusty room, there was no rank. There was only heat and the terrified realization that they were falling in love in the middle of a war zone. Cale pulled back, breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers. "If we survive this," he said, his voice trembling, "this complicates things." "Good," Lyra said. "Simple is boring." A beeping sound from Rook's console broke the moment. Rook was sitting in the corner, pointedly looking away. I hate to interrupt the mating ritual of the fugitive class, Rook said. But we have a ping. Lyra and Kale separated, smoothing their clothes. They walked over to the console. The data drive, Rook said. I cracked the first layer. It is a list of assets. But I also found a communication log. There is an informant. Someone on the inside who was trying to leak the Aegis Lazarus data before the gala. Who? Kale asked. He goes by the handle Veritas, Rook said. He just sent a message to a dead drop server. He wants to meet. He claims to have physical proof of who ordered the poisoning. Where? Lyra asked. The Rusty Gear, Rook said. It is a bar in Sector 9. Neutral ground. It is a trap, Kale said immediately. Probably, Rook agreed. But we don't have a choice. The data drive is fragmented. We need the encryption key Veritas has to read the rest. We go, Lyra said. But we go prepared. The Rusty Gear was a dive bar carved into the side of a ventilation shaft. It was loud, dark, and smelled of cheap lubricant. Lyra and Kale sat in a booth at the back. Kale had pulled his hood low. Lyra scanned the room. A man slid into the booth opposite them. He was nondescript, wearing a gray maintenance uniform. He looked terrified. You are the girl, the man whispered. The immune one. I am Lyra, she corrected. Are you Veritas? The man nodded. He slid a physical data chip across the table. It is all in here, he said, his voice shaking. The recordings, the bank transfers. Who ordered it? Kyle asked. Who tried to kill me? The man looked at Kale. He recognized the eyes beneath the hood. They didn't want to kill you. Prince, the man said. That is the lie, the poison. It wasn't meant to kill. What? Kale frowned. It was a catalyst, the man said. It was designed to trigger a latent genetic marker. If you had drunk it, you would have died. Yes, but that wasn't the goal. They knew you wouldn't drink it. Kale looked confused. I don't understand. The man looked at Lyra. They knew she would drink it. Lyra froze. The man continued, talking faster now. They have been watching her for years. The protocol office assignment, not an accident. Placing her at the gala, not an accident. They needed a public event. They needed a crisis to activate her biology in front of witnesses. They needed a miracle to sell the war. Lyra felt the room spin. I was chosen? You are Project Lazarus, the man whispered. You are the product. They just needed to take you out of the packaging. Who? Kale demanded. Who is they? The man opened his mouth. It is the Regent. A red dot appeared on the man's forehead. Down! Kale screamed. He tackled Lyra, shoving her under the table. Thwip! A single high-velocity round punched through the window and struck the informant in the head. He slumped forward, dead before he hit the table. Panic erupted in the bar. Patrons screamed and scrambled for the exits. The chip, Lyra yelled. She reached up, grabbing the data chip from the table, her hands slick with the dead man's blood. Kyle dragged her toward the back exit. Sniper! Kale shouted. Move! They burst out into the alleyway. Rain lashed down on them. They ran. They didn't stop running until they were 3 sectors away, huddled in the shadow of a fusion reactor. Lyra leaned against the wall, gasping for air. She looked at the blood on her hand. She looked at the chip. It wasn't heroism, she whispered. Her voice was hollow. Kale stood guard, watching the alley mouth. What? In the ballroom, Lyra said. I thought I made a choice. I thought I chose to save you. I thought I was brave. She looked up at Kale, tears mixing with the rain on her face. But I was just a lab rat running through a maze. They set the stage. They put out the bait. And I did exactly what they wanted. My whole life. It has been a script. Cale holstered his weapon. He walked over to her. He took her bloody hand in his. Maybe they wrote the beginning, he said fiercely. Maybe they set the stage, but they didn't write this part. They didn't write you escaping. They didn't write us standing here. He squeezed her hand. You are off script now, Lyra, and that makes you dangerous. Lyra closed her hand around the chip. She felt the hard edge of the plastic biting into her palm. They wanted a weapon, she said, her voice turning cold and hard as steel. Fine. They have one. The shuttle dropped out of warp space with a shudder that rattled Lyra Voss's teeth. Outside the viewport, the universe was a bruise of purple and black, dominated by the swirling gases of the Vesper Nebula. Floating in the center of this celestial storm was Vesper Station, a structure that looked less like a piece of technology and more like a cathedral carved from an asteroid. Spires of gray stone jutted out into the vacuum, capped with atmospheric force fields that shimmered like stained glass. It was a place of silence. It was a place where the outlawed science of the previous century had gone to hide behind the mask of religious contemplation. Rook fought with the controls of their stolen transport. Docking request sent, Rook muttered, tapping furiously on the console. I am using an encryption key I borrowed from a dead smuggler 3 years ago. If this doesn't work, we are going to be painted across the hull in microscopic layers. Cale Seraphis stood behind the pilot's chair. He was watching the station with a look of intense recognition. It will work, Cale said. The Order of the Silent Helix accepts all travelers. That is their dogma. They believe that data is the soul of the universe. Lyra looked at him. You sound like you have been here. I have not, Cale said. But my history tutors forced me to memorize their charter. They were exiled 50 years ago for refusing to stop genetic experimentation. They called it seeking God in the double helix. The Empire called it crimes against humanity. The comms panel crackled. Approach vector confirmed. A voice intoned. It sounded deep and synthesized. Welcome, pilgrims of the code. Rook let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since they left the Undercity. We are in, Rook said. I am parking this rust bucket in the tertiary bay. Try not to look like fugitives. Lyra looked down at her hands. She was still wearing the scavenged clothes from the safe house, but she felt exposed. The data chip they had taken from the dead informant burned a hole in her pocket. It led here, to a name buried in the files, Brother Silas. They disembarked into a hangar that smelled of burning incense and sterilized ozone. Monks in robes made of dark, woven fiber moved silently through the bay, their faces hidden by hoods. Some of them had cybernetic eyes that glowed soft blue. Others had mechanical limbs that whirred softly. We need to find Brother Silas, Lyra whispered. Leave the distraction to me, Rook said. I have always wanted to debate theology with a cyborg. They moved deeper into the station. The architecture was oppressive. High vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Walls lined with banks of servers that hummed with the collective knowledge of 1,000 forbidden experiments. They found Brother Silas in the genitorium, a garden where plants from a dozen dead worlds grew under artificial lights. He was an old man, his skin like parchment, sitting in a hover chair. His legs were gone, replaced by a suspension field. He looked up as they approached. His eyes were milky white, blind, but he turned his head unerringly toward Lyra. I hear a heartbeat that does not match the rhythm of nature, Silas said. His voice was dry, like leaves scraping on stone. Lyra stepped forward. I am looking for answers, she said. Silas smiled. It was a sad, broken expression. You are looking for your history, child. Come closer. Let me taste the air around you. Lyra hesitated, then stepped into the circle of light. Silas raised a hand. He held a small scanner, ancient and battered. He waved it over her. The scanner chirped, a single, high-pitched note. Silas lowered the device. He let out a long sigh. Generation 4, he whispered, the dormant strain. We thought it had been scrubbed from the gene pool. What are you talking about? Lyra demanded. What is Generation 4? Silas gestured to a bench. Sit. It is a long story, and it is not a happy one. He waited until Lyra, Kale, and Rook were settled, 50 years ago. The Aegis Lazarus project was not just a military operation. It was a philosophy. We believed that humanity was too fragile for the stars. We wanted to build a better vessel for the soul. We began with volunteers, soldiers, convicts, the desperate. He paused, his blind eyes staring into the past. But the adult physiology rejected the changes, the immunity. It needed to be grown. It needed to be woven into the embryo. Lyra felt a coldness spread through her chest. You mean babies? We called them the first generation, Silas said. They died. The second generation survived but went mad. The third generation was sterile, but the fourth showed no signs of the mutation. They were perfectly normal. We thought we had failed. The project was disbanded. The subjects were released into the general population on the outer rim colonies. Their files were erased. He pointed a trembling finger at Lyra. But the genes were not gone. They were sleeping, recessive, waiting for a trigger. You are the great-granddaughter of a test subject, my dear. Your immunity is not a miracle. It is an inheritance. And the poison you drank, that was the key designed to unlock the door. Lyra stood up. The movement was violent. She knocked the bench back. No, she said. Her voice shook. That is a lie. My parents were farmers. My grandmother was a seamstress. They were carriers, Silas said gently. Unknowing vessels for a weapon designed before they were born. You were never meant to be a person. Lyra, you were meant to be a fail-safe, a biological backup drive for the Empire's survival. Lyra backed away. She felt sick. Not physically, her body wouldn't allow that. But her soul felt like it was heaving. Her memories of childhood, the warm summers on the farm, her mother's laugh, the struggle to get into the protocol academy, suddenly felt fake. Had she been smart or engineered? Had she been strong or designed? Lyra, Kale said, reaching for her. Don't! Lyra snapped. She turned and ran. She ran out of the garden, down the stone corridors, past the silent monks. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to be away from the old man's voice. She found herself on a viewing platform overlooking the nebula. The swirling purple gas filled her vision. It looked like a bruise. She gripped the railing. Her hands were strong enough to bend the metal. I am a product, she whispered to the void. I am a machine made of meat. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn. Go away, Kale, I will not, Kale said. He stood beside her. He didn't touch her. He just looked out at the nebula. What Silas said changes nothing. Kale said, It changes everything, Lyra shouted, spinning to face him. Her eyes were glowing with the intensity of her distress. Don't you get it? I am not real. My lineage, my history, it is all a manufacturing log. I didn't save you because I was brave. I saved you because I was built to survive. I am a tool. And you are the prince of the people who built me. Kale flinched. The accusation hit its mark. I did not build you. Lyra, your grandfather did, Lyra cried. Your throne did. You look at me and you see a person, but your council sees a lost asset. That is why they want me back, not for justice, for inventory. She turned back to the void, wrapping her arms around herself. I am a tragedy. Kyle, I am a monster story, and I refuse to be the sad chapter in your biography. Go home. Go be Prince. Leave the experiment alone. Kale was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice low and devoid of the royal polish he wore like armor. Do you know what my father told me when I was 10? He told me that a king has no friends, only interests. He told me that my marriage would be a treaty, my children would be heirs, and my death would be a state holiday. He stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers on the railing. I have been a product my entire life. Lyra, I was bred for the throne just as surely as you were bred for immunity. I know what it feels like to look in the mirror and see a function instead of a face. Lyra looked at him. She saw the pain in his eyes. It was deep and old. I am terrified, Lyra. Kale confessed. I am terrified that I want you. Because I have been trained to possess things and to control them, and when I look at you, I want to keep you safe. I want to lock you in the highest tower and put a fleet around you so nothing can ever hurt you again. He clenched his fist. But that is not love. That is ownership. And I am trying. I am trying so hard to learn the difference. Lyra looked at his hand. It was shaking. The Prince of the Empire was trembling. She reached out and covered his hand with hers. Love that limits freedom is not love, Lyra said softly. It is just a softer cage. I know, Kale whispered. If you want to be with me, Lyra said, her voice gaining strength, you have to accept that I am dangerous. You have to accept that I might die. You have to accept that I belong to no one but myself, not the Empire, not the project, and not you. I accept it, Kale said. Then stop trying to save me, Lyra said, and start helping me burn this project to the ground. Kale nodded. A grim determination settled over his features. Where do we start? They found Rook in the main archive hall. He was standing on a table, wearing a stolen robe that was 3 sizes too big for him. He had fashioned a hat out of server components and was holding a fiber-optic cable like a scepter. A group of security monks had surrounded him, looking confused. And I say unto you, Rook bellowed, waving the cable, the bandwidth of the soul is infinite, but the firewall of sin must be breached. Who among you has not clicked on a suspicious link? Let him cast the first packet. The monks looked at each other. Is he a high priest from the Silicon sector? One asked. He speaks the tongue of the ancients, another muttered. Lyra and Kale walked in. Rook, Lyra hissed. What are you doing? Stalling, Rook whispered loudly. Get to the terminal. I have them mesmerized by my spiritual gibberish. Rook turned back to the monks. Now, let us meditate on the loading screen of life. Hum with me. He began to make a loud buzzing noise. The monks, unsure of protocol, hesitantly began to buzz back. Lyra ran to the main interface. She plugged in the chip Silas had given her, a master key to the monastery's deep storage. Kale stood at her back, watching the doors. We are in, Lyra said. She scanned the files, the screen filled with data, not just history. Current operations. Oh no. Lyra breathed. What is it? Kale asked. Helix didn't just restart the project to make immune soldiers, Lyra said, scrolling through the manifest. Look at this invoice. They are manufacturing the pathogen. She pointed to a chemical formula. It is a binary weapon. They release the sickness on a rebel world. The population starts to die. Then Helix swoops in with the miracle cure, the antibodies harvested from a Lazarus subject. They create the fear, and they sell the safety. They are not selling peace. They are selling a protection racket on a galactic scale. They are monsters, Kale said, his voice cold. We have to copy this, Lyra said. If we broadcast this. The alarms cut her off. They weren't the subtle chimes of the station. They were the harsh, screaming klaxons of a breach. External docking clamps engaged. The computer announced, hostile breach in Sector North. Helix found us, Kale said, drawing his weapon. Rook jumped down from the table, abandoning his sermon. So much for the loading screen, he said. The doors to the archive blasted inward. Mercenaries in black combat armor poured through the smoke. They wore the Helix insignia, a double helix wrapped around a sword. Secure the target, the lead mercenary shouted. Kill the spare. They opened fire. Kale returned fire, his plasma pistol cracking in the confined space. Get behind the servers, Kale yelled to Lyra. We need the upload, Lyra shouted. It is only at 80%. She stayed at the terminal, her fingers flying across the keys. Plasma bolts sizzled past her head, melting the stone wall behind her. Cover her, Rook yelled. He pulled a small EMP grenade from his robe and chucked it. The blast scrambled the mercenaries' visors for a second, buying them time, 90%. Suddenly, a canister landed in the middle of the room. It hissed. Gas, Kale shouted. It wasn't the yellow nerve gas this time. It was a red mist, heavy, oily. Bioagent detected. The station computer droned. Threat level, pandemic. The monks began to scream. They clawed at their throats. The gas was blistering their skin on contact. Lyra looked at the screen. Upload complete. She grabbed the drive. She looked at the room. The mercenaries were retreating, sealing their environmental suits. But the monks were dying. Rook was coughing, pulling his robe over his face. Kale was stumbling, his face pale. Lyra took a breath. The red mist filled her lungs. It tasted like copper and rot. Her body burned for a second, a flash of fever, and then it cooled. Her blood surged, hunting the intruder, dismantling it, turning death into fuel. She looked at Kale. He was on his knees. I can't carry everyone, she thought. Then she saw the ventilation hub in the center of the room. It was the intake for the environmental cycler. If she could block it, the gas would stop spreading. But the manual override was on the other side of the room, through the thickest concentration of the mist. She didn't look at Kale. She didn't look at Rook. She looked at the terrified monks huddled in the corner. She ran. She ran through the red fog. The mercenaries saw her. They stopped firing, stunned. She is walking through it. One of them gasped over the comms. That is a level 4 hemotoxin. She should be soup. Lyra reached the override wheel. It was red hot from the chemical reaction. She grabbed it. Her skin sizzled, then healed instantly. She cranked the wheel. 1 turn, 2 turns. The intake vents slammed shut with a deafening clang. The gas flow stopped. The recyclers kicked into overdrive, sucking the poison out of the air. Lyra stood alone in the center of the room. The red mist swirling around her ankles like a vanquished dragon. She glowed. The reaction to the pathogen had triggered her bioluminescence to a blinding degree. She shone with a fierce violet light that illuminated the dark arches of the monastery. The security cameras were still rolling. The feed was being broadcast to the Helix command ship, and from there, intercepted by Rook's open channel to the galaxy. She turned to the mercenaries. "Get off my station," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden silence, it sounded like a judgment. The mercenaries broke. They were paid to fight soldiers, not gods. They retreated, dragging their wounded. Lyra walked back to Kale. He was coughing, wiping blood from his nose. He looked up at her. She was terrifyingly beautiful, a being of light and vengeance. You did it, Cale rasped. Lyra offered him a hand. We did it, she said. The escape was a blur. They stole a Helix shuttle, leaving the mercenaries stranded on the station. Once they were in hyperspace, safe in the void between stars, the reality of what had happened hit them. Rook sat at the comm station, his face pale but his fingers flying. Guys? You might want to see this. He pulled up the galactic news feed. Every channel was playing the footage. Lyra standing in the red mist, Lyra glowing, Lyra saving the monks. The headlines scrolled past in a dozen languages. The immune flame, the angel of Vesper, biological weapon or savior. The narrative had shattered. She was no longer the heroic loyalist or the staged fraud. She was something else entirely. Crowds were gathering on Aurelia Prime. Rebels were painting violet symbols on government buildings. The footage of her defying the Helix mercenaries had become a rallying cry for every downtrodden colony in the sector. You are a symbol now, Cale said quietly, watching the screen. You are the face of the revolution. I didn't ask for this, Lyra said, leaning against the bulkhead. I just wanted to stop the gas. Symbols rarely get to choose their meaning, Cale said. The comms console beeped again. A priority channel override. This one is for you. Highness, Rook said. It is from the Regency. Secure line. Cale walked over. He pressed the button. A hologram of the Lord Regent appeared. He was an older version of Cale, but with eyes that had long ago traded their soul for power. Prince Cale, the Regent said. His voice was ice. You have been identified aiding a known fugitive and terrorist. You have attacked a sanctioned corporate partner. You have disgraced the bloodline. Cale stood straight. I have exposed a conspiracy. Father. Silence, the Regent barked. The girl is a threat to the stability of the Empire. She is a variable we cannot control. He leaned forward, the hologram flickering. Here is your choice. Return to the capital immediately. Alone. Renounce the girl. Deny the footage. If you do this, you will resume your duties. And if I don't? Cale asked. The Regent's face hardened. Then you are stripped of your rank. You are stripped of your name. And you will be declared an enemy of the throne. The fleet will hunt you. And they will not be set to stun. The transmission cut out. The silence in the shuttle was absolute. Rook looked at Cale. Lyra looked at Cale. Cale looked at his reflection in the dark screen. He saw the prince. He saw the expectations of 20 generations of Seraphis rulers. Then he looked at Lyra. He saw the woman who had walked through poison for him. He saw the woman who had refused to own him, and refused to be owned. He reached out and unclasped the high collar of his tunic, the one embroidered with the royal crest. He threw it on the floor. Cale? Lyra asked softly. He turned to the navigation computer. Rook, set a course for the capital, Cale said. Rook's jaw dropped. You are turning yourself in? No, Cale said. His voice was calm, dangerous. I am going back, but not alone, and not to surrender. He looked at Lyra, and a smile touched his lips, sharp and reckless. If they want a war, let's bring them one. The atmosphere of Aurelia Prime had changed. Before, the air had smelled of ozone and expensive flowers, the scent of a capital at peace with its own decadence. Now, it smelled of burning plastic and fear. Lyra Voss looked out the viewport of the stealth transport as they descended through the cloud layer. The city below was a sprawling circuit board of light, but the patterns were wrong. Sections of the grid were dark. Other sections were flashing with the strobing red and blue of police barricades. On the massive holographic billboards that usually displayed luxury perfumes or enlistment ads, two warring narratives fought for dominance. One showed a stylized, heroic image of Lyra in a pristine white uniform, staring nobly into the middle distance. The text beneath it read, "The daughter of the Empire, protected, cherished, loyal." The other image was a grainy, pirated loop of Lyra in the Vesper Monastery, glowing with violet light, her hand on the ventilation wheel, saving the monks. The caption sprayed across it in digital graffiti was simple. "The immune flame. She burns for us." "They are trying to canonize you to keep you quiet," Rook said from the pilot's seat. He was tapping nervously on the console. "If they make you a saint, nobody will believe you are a prisoner." "And the rebels are making me a war god," Lyra said, rubbing her temples. "I am not sure which is worse." Cale stood by the airlock, checking the charge on his plasma pistol. He had shaved the stubble from their time on the run and donned a fresh uniform Rook had fabricated, the midnight blue of the royal house, stripped of the military medals he had earned but kept the sash of his rank. He looked like a prince again, but his eyes were hard, lacking the soft boredom they had held a week ago. "It is time to split up," Cale said. He did not look at Lyra. If he looked at her, he might not be able to leave. "You are walking into a shark tank," Lyra said. "The Regency Council will skin you alive." "They cannot touch me yet," Cale replied, adjusting his cuffs. "I am still the heir apparent. They need me to legitimize their control over you. If I disappear, the narrative falls apart. I have to go back and play the penitent son. I have to buy us time." He finally turned to her. The distance between them in the small cabin felt infinite and non-existent all at once. "Stay with Rook," he commanded softly. "Do not engage until the signal." "I am not good at sitting still," Lyra said. "I know," Kyle said. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That is why I am worried." He opened the airlock. The wind of the upper atmosphere howled outside. A royal extraction drone was waiting to take him to the palace. "Trust me," he said. "I trust you," Lyra replied. "It is the sharks I am worried about." Cale stepped onto the drone. It detached and shot toward the golden spire of the Imperial Palace. Lyra watched him go. Then she turned to Rook. "Get us to the broadcast node," she said. "I have a speech to give." The council chamber of the Regency was a room designed to make human beings feel small. The table was a ring of obsidian, suspended over a pit of absolute darkness that supposedly went down to the planetary core. It was a theatrical intimidation tactic that Cale had always found tedious. Today, he found it dangerous. He walked into the room. The 12 members of the High Council were already seated. At the head of the table sat Lord Regent Cassius, his uncle. Cassius was a man who looked like he had been carved from marble and then left out in the rain, hard, eroded, and cold. "Prince Cale," Cassius said. His voice echoed in the vast chamber. "We were beginning to think you had defected to the rabble." Cale bowed. It was a precise, stiff motion. "I was securing the asset, Uncle. The situation on Vesper Station was chaotic. I judged it best to remove Lyra Voss from the combat zone before Helix mercenaries could damage her value." Cassius leaned forward. His eyes narrowed. "You judged it best to run with a thief and a hacker? You judged it best to let the girl broadcast authorized footage that has sparked riots in 3 sectors? "I cannot control the girl's bioluminescence," Cale said smoothly. "Nor can I control the incompetence of Helix security. I brought her back to the capital, didn't I? She is safe. She is in a secure location, awaiting my command. Bring her to us," General Harkness of the Defense Directorate demanded. He slammed a fist on the obsidian table. "She belongs in a containment cell, not a hotel room." "She is not a prisoner," Cale said. his voice dropping an octave. She is the future of this empire. If you cage her, she breaks. If you push her, she fights. I have earned her trust. Let me manage her. Cassius studied Cale for a long, agonizing minute. He was looking for the lie. He was looking for the rebellious boy who used to hide in the service tunnels. Cale met his gaze with the blank, arrogant mask of royalty. Very well, Cassius said. You have 24 hours to bring her to the lab for the extraction protocols. If you fail, we will assume you are compromised. And Cale? Yes. Lord Regent, if you are compromised, do not expect your bloodline to save you. Accidents happen so easily in times of unrest. Rook had set up their mobile operations center in the server room of an abandoned university in the lower districts. The walls were lined with dusty hard drives and cobwebs. We have a problem, Rook said, sliding a keyboard across a crate. The Imperial Media Grid has upgraded its firewalls. They are using Helix encryption. I can't just slice in. I need a back door. Lyra paced the room. She was wearing a heavy cloak over her civilian clothes, but she felt like she was glowing underneath it. What kind of back door? A physical one, Rook said. There is a repeater station on the roof of the Senate building. If I can plug directly into the hard line, I can override the signal, but we have to get there. The Senate building, Lyra said, the most guarded building in the city. Rook grinned. Normally, yes. But today is the feast of St. Ethelgard. There is a parade. The streets are full of floats and dancers. Security is looking for bombs, not broadcast equipment. They moved through the city in the shadow of the celebration. The streets were a riot of color. Huge holographic dragons floated between the skyscrapers. Dancers in neon silks spun through the crowds. But underneath the music, there was tension. Riot police in riot gear stood on every corner, their visors dark. They reached the service entrance of the Senate. Rook worked the lock with a magnetic pick while Lyra stood lookout. You are trembling, Rook noted as the door hissed open. I am about to tell 500 billion people that their government is lying to them, Lyra said. I think I am allowed to tremble. They climbed the stairs to the roof. The wind was high, whipping Lyra's hair across her face. Below them, the parade looked like a river of light. Rook ran to the repeater dish. He jammed a cable into the port. I need 3 minutes to bypass the handshake protocol, he shouted over the wind. Get ready. Lyra stood in front of the camera drone Rook had deployed. She pulled down her hood. She took a deep breath. I am ready. Rook hit the final key. We are live in 3, 2, 1. The holographic dragons over the city flickered and died. The massive advertising screens went black. The news feeds in the aristocrats' living rooms froze. Then, Lyra's face appeared. It was not the polished, airbrushed face of the propaganda posters. It was raw. Her eyes were tired. There was a smudge of grease on her cheek. Citizens of Aurelia, she began. Her voice shook for a second, then steadied. My name is Lyra Voss, in the council chamber. The screens on the wall shifted. Cassius stood up, knocking his chair over. Cut the feed, he roared. We can't, a technician shouted. It is a hardline override. It is coming from the Senate roof. They told you I am a miracle, Lyra said to the galaxy. They told you I am a gift from the stars, sent to protect you. They lied. She looked directly into the lens. I am not a gift. I am a product. My immunity was engineered in a lab 50 years ago, part of a project called Aegis Lazarus. The government that claims to protect you created a lineage of human test subjects and discarded them when they became inconvenient. She stepped closer to the camera. Now, the Helix Consortium and the Regency Council want to sell you safety. They have created a sickness so they can sell you the cure. They want to turn my blood into a subscription service. They want to own the right to your survival." Lyra raised her hand. It began to glow, the violet light soft against the dark sky. "I am not imperial property. I am not a strategic asset. I am a person. And I am telling you that safety without freedom is just a prison with a nicer view. Do not let them sell you your own lives. Demand the truth. Demand the—" Static cut across the screen. The image of Lyra twisted and warped. It was replaced by a new video. It was grainy, clearly manufactured footage. It showed Lyra in a bedroom, laughing, holding a glass of wine. It showed her leaning over a man who looked like Prince Kale. It showed her whispering into his ear, her hand on his chest. The audio was spliced together from a dozen different conversations. "I will do anything for power," the fake Lyra purred. "Just get me to the throne. I will make them love me." The feed cut back to a news anchor, a woman with a severe face. "We apologize for the pirate signal," the anchor said smoothly. "The terrorist Lyra Voss is attempting to spread disinformation. As you can see, she is a manipulative agent who seduced the prince to gain access to state secrets. She is mentally unstable and dangerous." On the roof, Rook slammed his laptop shut. "They jammed us," he spat, "and they had that deep fake ready to go. They were waiting for this." Lyra stared at the blank camera drone. She felt cold. "They turned it into a sex scandal," she whispered. "I talked about genocide and ethics, and they made it about ambition and lust." "We have to go," Rook said, packing his gear. They traced the signal. "Security is on the way." They retreated to the Undercity, to a safe house Kale had prepared deep in the geothermal sector. It was a small room, hot and humid from the steam pipes. Kale was waiting for them. He had watched the broadcast. He had watched the takedown. He stood up when Lyra entered. "They are good," he said quietly. "I will give them that. They know how to weaponize shame." Lyra sat on the edge of the cot. She didn't cry. She felt too hollow for tears. "Did you see the comments?" she asked. "Rook showed me the feed before we went dark. They are calling me a whore. They are calling me a witch. Half of them believe the lie because it is easier than believing their government is evil." Kyle sat beside her. He took her hands. "It doesn't matter what they call you," he said. "It matters to me," Lyra snapped, pulling her hands away. "I wanted to be a voice. They made me a joke. How do we fight this, Kale? Truth doesn't work against a lie that big." Kale looked at her. The room was dim, lit only by the red glow of the heater. "We stopped playing their game," he said. He reached out again, this time touching her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "They want you to be ashamed. Lyra, they want you to feel small so you will come crawling back for their protection. They want you to think that your body is the problem." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "But they forgot one thing. They forgot that I know you. I know the woman who jumped in front of a poison chalice not for glory, but because she couldn't watch a stranger die. I know the woman who walked through nerve gas to save monks who couldn't save themselves." Lyra closed her eyes. She leaned into his touch. "I am tired. Kale. I am so tired of being strong. You don't have to be strong right now," Kale whispered. "You just have to be here. With me." The kiss started slow. It was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled collision they had shared in the safe house before. This was quiet. It was a reclamation. Lyra kissed him, and for a moment, the noise of the galaxy fell away. The propaganda, the lies, the politics, it all dissolved. There was only the heat of his skin and the steady rhythm of his heart. She pulled him closer. The barrier between them, prince and commoner, asset and owner, shattered completely. "This isn't about the throne," Kale murmured against her skin. "If I have to burn the palace down to keep you free, I will do it. I would rather break tradition than see you caged." "I don't want you to burn it down," Lyra said, looking up at him with eyes that were clear and fierce. "I want us to build something new. But I choose this. I choose you. Not because you are a prince, but because you are the only one who listens." They lay together in the dark, finding a brief stolen peace in the eye of the hurricane. It was a declaration of intent. They were not just allies anymore. They were a unit, and that made them infinitely more dangerous. The peace lasted for 3 hours. It was broken by a chime from Kale's personal comms unit. It was a Priority 1 override code. Kale sat up, instantly alert. He grabbed the device. "It is the Regent," he said. He accepted the connection. The holographic face of Cassius appeared in the center of the room. He looked smug. "Nephew," Cassius said, "I see you are not in your quarters. I assume you are with the girl." "I am negotiating her surrender," Kale lied, though he knew the game was up. "Stop," Cassius said. "The time for games is over. We know you are in the geothermal sector. We have thermal satellites." Kale stood up, positioning himself between the hologram and Lyra. "If you send a strike team, we will fight. And Lyra is very hard to kill." "We are not sending a strike team," Cassius said. "That would be messy. We are sending a message." The hologram shifted. It showed a map of the capital city. A red pulsing dot appeared over Sector 12, the poorest, most densely populated district in the Undercity. Millions of people lived there in squalor. "Do you know what that is?" Cassius asked. "It is a ventilation hub," Kale said. "It is the distribution point for the atmospheric cyclers," Cassius corrected. "And 5 minutes ago, Helix technicians installed a canister of the Red Death pathogen into the main intake." Lyra gasped. She stepped into the light. "You wouldn't," she said. "Ah, Miss Voss," Cassius said, nodding to her, "the seductress herself. I would, and I will." He looked at his chronometer. "Here is the deal. You surrender yourself to the Ministry of Science within 1 hour. You submit to the extraction program. You verify the official narrative that you were mentally unstable and have been cured. If you do this, the canister remains sealed." "And if I don't?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling with rage. "If you don't," Cassius said, "we open the valve. The pathogen will spread through Sector 12 in 10 minutes. 2 million people will die in agony, and we will blame it on you. We will say it was a terrorist attack by your rebel friends." "You are insane," Kyle shouted. "You would kill your own citizens?" "We are culling the herd to save the species," Cassius said. "The Empire requires order. You have 1 hour. The connection terminated." Lyra stood frozen. She looked at the map on the screen. 2 million lives. "They won," she whispered. "I can't let them die. Kyle, I have to go." "No." Kyle grabbed her arm. "If you go, they will drain you dry. They will kill you and then use your blood to enslave the rest. It solves nothing." "But I can't let them release the gas," Lyra cried. Kale paced the room. "There has to be another way." Lyra looked at her hands. She looked at the glowing veins under her skin. "Wait," she said. She grabbed Rook, who had been sleeping in the corner. "Rook, wake up!" "The bioweapon. The Red Death. It is the same one they used on Vesper, right?" Rook rubbed his eyes. "Yeah. Modified strain." "Why?" "My body neutralized it," Lyra said. "My blood. It didn't just fight it. It created an antibody." She turned to Kale. Cassius wants my blood because he wants to patent the cure. He wants to sell it. But what if we give it away? What do you mean? Cale asked. I mean we reverse engineer the immunity, Lyra said, her mind racing. We take a sample of my blood, we sequence the antibody, and then we upload the formula to every medical fabricator in the galaxy. Open source, free. Rook sat up straighter. If we do that, Helix loses their monopoly. The patent becomes worthless. Any hospital with a bioprinter could make the cure for the cost of sugar water. Exactly, Lyra said. We strip them of their leverage. But we have to do it before the hour is up. Rook, can you sequence it here? Cale asked. I have a portable analyzer, Rook said. It is slow, but I can overclock it. But we need a distribution network. Just uploading the file isn't enough. We need the medical guild to verify it. We need a coalition, Lyra said. An interspecies medical coalition. We need to call the delegates from the Gala, the Rigelians, the Avians, all the species Helix has been extorting. We offer them the cure for free, on one condition. They enforce the ban on Helix patents. It is a coup, Cale realized, a diplomatic coup. We are not fighting with guns, Lyra said. We are fighting with biology. Rook, get the needle, Lyra ordered. 45 minutes later, the upload bar on Rook's screen hit 100%. The file labeled the Vesper Protocol Open Source Immunity was blasted out to every medical server, university, and embassy in the quadrant. At the same time, Cale sent a priority message to the military commanders stationed in orbit. He didn't send it as a prince. He sent it as a soldier. The Regency is about to deploy a biological weapon on civilians in Sector 12. This is an unlawful order. Stand down or intervene. Choose your side. The response was immediate. On the screen, they watched the tactical map. The red dot over Sector 12 turned green. What happened? Lyra asked. Squadron Alpha, Rook said, reading the feed. They just dropped onto the ventilation hub. They secured the canister. They are refusing the Regent's order to deploy. Cale let out a breath. The military is splitting. The fleet commanders loyal to the old code are turning against the political appointees. We did it, Lyra said. Not yet, a voice said from the doorway. They spun around. Standing in the entrance of the safe house was Lord Valerius, Cale's oldest friend and chief advisor. He was holding a disruptor pistol leveled at Cale's chest. Valerius, Cale said, stunned. How did you find us? You really should update your security codes. Cale, Valerius said, stepping into the room. 3 Helix commandos stepped in behind him. You are working for them? Cale asked, his voice full of betrayal. I am working for stability, Valerius said. Your little open-source stunt just crashed the economy. Helix stock is plummeting. Do you have any idea how much money you just evaporated? I don't care about the money, Cale said. That is why you are unfit to rule. Valerius sneered. He gestured to the commandos. Kill the hacker, secure the girl, and the prince. Well, the prince died tragically in a rebel crossfire. Cale looked at Lyra. Run, he mouthed. Lyra looked at the disruptor pointed at Cale's heart. She looked at the commandos. She didn't run. She stepped in front of Cale. If you want the asset, Valerius, Lyra said, her voice calm and deadly. You have to go through the weapon. Her skin flared with blinding light. Valerius flinched. Fire! The room erupted in chaos. The civil war had begun. And it started in a steam-filled room in the Undercity, with a traitor's gun and a girl who refused to burn. The disruptor blast that had shattered the safe house door in the Undercity was the spark that burned down the house of Seraphis. It had taken 3 seconds for Lyra Voss to blind the Helix commandos with a flare of bioluminescent rage. It had taken 10 minutes for Squadron Alpha to secure the perimeter. And now, 6 hours later, the capital of Aurelia Prime was a broken mosaic of fire and smoke. The Civil War was not fought in trenches. It was fought in the sky lanes, where military frigates painted with the royal crest engaged private Helix security drones. It was fought in the datasphere, where Rook and a legion of anonymous hackers dismantled the Regency's financial firewalls. And it was fought in the streets, where citizens who had watched Lyra's broadcast tore down the propaganda posters and replaced them with hand-painted violet symbols. Prince Kale Seraphis stood on the landing pad of the rebel-secured staging area. The wind whipped his hair across his face. He looked at the burning horizon. "You do not have to do this alone," Lyra said. She stood beside him, checking the seal on her tactical suit. It was white, stark against the grime of the city, chosen deliberately to be visible in the dark. "I do," Kale replied. His voice was steady, stripped of all doubt. "The Regency is a hydra. You are going to cut off the head at Helix Tower. But I have to burn the heart in the tribunal. If I do not stand in front of the council and expose them, the law will never change. They will just replace Cassius with another puppet." He turned to her. He touched her face, his thumb tracing the cheekbone. "Do not die, Lyra. That is a royal command." Lyra smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous thing. "I am immune to death, remember? You just try to keep your head on your shoulders." They parted ways without a backward glance. There was no time for long goodbyes. The timeline for the bioweapon deployment was ticking down. The Helix Tower was a monolith of black glass that pierced the smog layer of the industrial district. It was a fortress of corporate sovereignty, guarded by automated turrets and a private army that was better paid than the Imperial Guard. Lyra didn't knock. The rebel transport skiff, piloted by a terrified but determined defector, slammed into the 40th floor observation deck at 300 miles per hour. The crash shredded the reinforced glass and sent a shock wave through the building's structural dampers. Lyra rolled out of the burning wreckage before it stopped sliding. She was followed by Rook and a squad of 6 combat medics, doctors who had traded their scalpels for stun rifles. "Move!" Lyra shouted. "Secure the stairwell!" The lobby of the 40th floor was a scene of chaos. Helix security guards were scrambling, disoriented by the crash. Lyra did not give them time to recover. She moved through them like a storm. She didn't use a gun. She used her body. A guard fired a taser round. Lyra caught the wire, absorbed the voltage, and yanked him off his feet. Another threw a flashbang. Lyra walked through the blinding white light without blinking, knocking him unconscious with a precision strike to the solar plexus. "We need the 90th floor," Rook yelled, plugging his deck into a wall terminal. "The director's lab is in the penthouse. That is where the release codes are." "The elevators are locked down," one of the medics shouted, firing cover shots at a suppressing turret. Rook typed furiously. "Override in 3, 2, 1. Got it." The express lift chimed. The doors slid open. Lyra pushed Rook and the medics inside. "Go," she ordered. "You are coming with us," Rook protested. Lyra looked at the ceiling. "I can hear the ventilation system. No, they are prepping the secondary gas release. I have to draw their fire. I will take the service shaft. You get the codes." She hit the button for the 90th floor and stepped out of the lift. The doors closed, sealing her friends in safety. Lyra turned to face the corridor. A fresh wave of Helix mercenaries was pouring in from the stairwell. They wore heavy armor and carried plasma repeaters. Lyra took a deep breath. She felt the hum of her own blood, the alien power that had terrified her for weeks. Now, It just felt like fuel. "Come and get me," she whispered. She broke into a run, glowing with a violet intensity that made the mercenaries shield their eyes. She was the distraction, she was the target, and she was unstoppable. While Lyra fought her way up the tower, Cale walked into the lion's den. The Grand Tribunal Hall was packed. The delegates from the Interstellar Unity Gala were still there, trapped on the planet by the blockade. The Regency Council sat on their raised dais, looking down at the chaos with expressions of panicked arrogance. Lord Regent Cassius stood at the podium. He was shouting into the microphone, trying to maintain order. "The terrorists are attacking key infrastructure. We must declare martial law. The Constitution is suspended." The doors at the back of the hall banged open. Kyle Seraphis walked in. He was unarmed. He wore his dress uniform, but it was torn and stained with soot. He walked down the center aisle, the crowd parting before him like the sea. Cassius froze. "Seize him!" the regent screamed. "He is a traitor to the throne." Two royal guards stepped forward, their halberds lowered. Cale did not stop. He looked them in the eye. "Stand down, Lieutenant," Cale said softly. "You swore an oath to the Empire, not to a corporation." The guards hesitated, and they looked at the prince, then at the screaming regent. They stepped aside, raising their weapons in a salute. Cale ascended the dais. He stood next to his uncle. He leaned into the microphone. "The Constitution is not suspended," Cale said. His voice boomed through the hall, amplified by the speakers, broadcast to every screen in the city. "The Constitution is being rewritten." "Lies!" a voice shouted from the shadows of the dais. Lord Valerius stepped out, Cale's former advisor. The man who had held a gun to his chest in the Undercity was smiling. He held a datapad in his hand. "The prince is unwell," Valerius announced to the delegates. "The stress of his mistress's radicalization has broken his mind. He is hallucinating conspiracies." Cale turned to face Valerius. The betrayal still stung, a cold ache in his chest. "I am not hallucinating the helix payments in your offshore accounts." "Valerius, I am not hallucinating the bioweapon aimed at Sector 12. Prove it." Valerius sneered. Cale reached into his jacket. The entire hall held its breath. Was he drawing a weapon? He pulled out a small, archaic device, a physical data drive. "This is the flight recorder from the Vesper Station shuttle," Cale said. "It contains the full schematic of the pathogen, and it contains the authorization signature for its manufacture." He held it up. "The signature belongs to Lord Valerius." Valerius's smile vanished. He drew his disruptor pistol. "He is lying!" Valerius screamed. He aimed at Cale. Cale did not flinch. "Shoot me," he challenged. "Shoot the heir apparent in front of the entire Galactic Assembly. Show them exactly who you are." Valerius's hand shook. He looked at the cameras, he looked at the horrified delegates, and he realized too late that he had lost the narrative. But he was a desperate man, and desperate men do not surrender. "Death to the traitors!" Valerius yelled, and he pulled the trigger. Cale moved. He didn't move away. He moved forward. He sidestepped the plasma bolt, which scorched the air inches from his ear. He closed the distance in 2 strides. It was not a duel of swords. It was a brawl. Cale struck Valerius in the wrist, knocking the gun away. He punched him in the jaw, a blow fueled by years of repressed anger at the court's hypocrisy. Valerius stumbled back, drawing a vibro knife from his belt. He slashed at Cale, cutting a deep gash across the prince's arm. Blood, bright and red, stained the blue uniform. The crowd screamed. The royal guard rushed forward, but Cale shouted them back. "No! This ends now!" Cale ducked under a second slash. He grabbed Valerius by the lapels of his expensive velvet coat and slammed him onto the dais. The knife clattered across the floor. Kyle held Valerius down. He was bleeding, panting, his hair wild. He looked up at the camera drones. "Look at him," Cale roared. "Look at the men who claim to own your safety. They are butchers." He ripped the Helix insignia pin from Valerius's collar and threw it into the crowd. "The Regency is dissolved," Cale declared. "The Council is under arrest for high treason against the people of Aurelia." A roar went up from the hall. It started low, a rumble of shock, and grew into a thunder of approval. The delegates stood up. The citizens in the viewing gallery began to chant, "Truth! Truth! Truth!" Cassius slumped in his chair, watching his power evaporate. Cale stood over the defeated advisor, clutching his bleeding arm. He had won the room. But the war was not over. Lyra kicked open the doors to the 90th floor laboratory. It was a cathedral of science. White walls, chrome surfaces, and in the center a massive glass cylinder filled with swirling red gas. The bioweapon. Standing in front of the console was Director Vane. She held a detonator in her hand. "Don't take another step, darling," Vane said. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly so. Lyra stopped. She was bruised, her white suit torn, her energy fading. "It is over." "Vane," Lyra said. "Cale has the council. The military has stood down. You have nowhere to go." "I have leverage," Vane said, tapping the glass cylinder. "This is the master dispersal unit. If I breach this tank, the concentration is high enough to kill everyone in this tower within seconds, and then it will vent into the city." She smiled. "You might survive it. Lyra, but your hacker friend, those brave little doctors, they will melt." Lyra looked at the ventilation shafts. She could hear Rook and the team working on the floor below. "What do you want?" Lyra asked. "I want a helicopter," Vane said. "I want a flight path to the outer rim. And I want you." "Me? You are the only asset worth saving," Vane said. "You are the golden goose. You come with me, willingly, and I leave the gas here." Lyra looked at the detonator. She looked at the gas. She realized then what Silas had meant on Vesper Station. She had been made to be a resource, a thing to be traded, a currency of flesh. "No," Lyra said. Vane's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Lyra said, stepping forward. Vane's thumb hovered over the button. "I will do it. I will kill them all." Lyra kept walking. "You think you understand value," Lyra said. "You think value is something you can patent. You think a person is just a collection of cells to be harvested." She reached the edge of the platform. "But you forgot the variable you can't engineer," Lyra said. "What variable?" Vane hissed. "Spite," Lyra said. She lunged. Vane screamed and pressed the button. The glass cylinder exploded. The red gas roared out, a tsunami of death. It hit Lyra first. It washed over her, thick and oily. Lyra didn't hold her breath. She inhaled. She gasped, her body arching in agony. This was the concentrated strain. It was 1,000,000 times more potent than the mist on Vesper. It felt like drinking liquid fire. Her vision went white. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it wanted to break free. But she didn't fall. She stood in the center of the cloud, her body glowing so bright it was blinding. She became a singularity. Her immune system went into overdrive, metabolizing the toxin faster than it could spread. She became a living filter. She grabbed Vane by the throat. The director was clawing at her own neck, her skin blistering instantly from the exposure. Lyra looked at her. Her eyes were solid violet light. "I am not a resource," Lyra said. Her voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. She threw Vane aside. Lyra reached into the shattered remains of the tank. She found the central core, the dispersal mechanism that was trying to pump the gas into the vents. She grabbed the metal casing. It was superheated. Her hand sizzled, then healed. She crushed it. She ripped the wiring out with her bare hands. She smashed the circuit board. She destroyed the machine with a primal, terrified violence. The humming stopped. The pumps died. The gas began to settle, heavy and inert on the floor. Lyra stood there, swaying. The light faded from her skin, leaving her pale and trembling. She fell to her knees. "Rook!" She keyed her comms. "Lyra!" Rook's voice was frantic. "We detected a massive spike. Are you okay?" "The gas is contained," Lyra whispered. She coughed. A small puff of red dust came out of her mouth. "I think I need a vacation," she said, and then she collapsed. The weeks that followed were a blur of tribunals, treaties, and reconstruction. The Regency was formally dissolved. Lord Cassius and Director Vane were in maximum security prison cells on the dark side of the moon. Lord Valerius had turned state's witness to save his own life, spilling every secret of the Helix conspiracy. Lyra woke up in a hospital bed. But this time, there were no hazmat suits. There were no locks on the door. The window was open, letting in the fresh breeze of a city that was finally breathing clean air. Kyle was sitting in the chair beside her. He was wearing a simple gray tunic, his arm in a sling. He was peeling an apple with a small knife. "You slept for 4 days," he said without looking up. Lyra sat up. She felt weak, but human. "Did we win?" she asked. Kyle handed her a slice of apple. "We survived," he said. "That is a start." He told her about the tribunal. He told her about the military standing down. He told her that the people were calling for a coronation. "They want a king," Kale said. "They want a hero." "What do they want with me?" Lyra asked. Kale put the knife down. He looked tired. "The Provisional Council wants to canonize you. They want to give you the title Guardian of the Realm. They want to build a statue. They want to give you a palace and a lifetime stipend." Lyra laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound. "A statue. So I can stand still and be looked at? It sounds like another cage." "Kale, I told them you would say that," Kale said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a document. It was thick, printed on heavy paper, and so I drafted this instead. Lyra took it. The title read, "The Constitutional Reform for Scientific Oversight." "Read Article 5, Kale said. Lyra read it. "No sentient being shall be subject to biological patent. The rights to one's own genetic code are inalienable. All medical research derived from the Aegis Lazarus lineage shall be placed in the public domain." "You wrote this?" Lyra asked. "I proposed it," Kale said. "The new civilian council ratified it this morning. We are building a new government, Lyra, one where science serves the people, not the other way around." Lyra looked at him. He wasn't the prince in the high tower anymore. He was a man who was building a foundation with his own hands. "And what about us?" Lyra asked. Kale leaned forward. He took her hand. "That is up to you. You are free, Lyra. For the first time in your life, you are truly free. You can take the stipend and leave. You can go to the wildest planet in the Rim and never see a politician again. No one will stop you. I made sure of that." Lyra looked at the open window. She thought about the farm she had grown up on. She thought about the quiet life she had dreamed of. Then she looked at Kale. She saw the scar on his arm where he had bled for her. She saw the hope in his gray eyes. She realized that freedom wasn't about running away. It was about choosing where to stay. "I am not going anywhere," Lyra said. Kale let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since the safe house. "Good," he said. "Because I have a lot of work to do, and I am terrible at writing speeches." Lyra squeezed his hand. "I am not your speechwriter, Highness. I am your partner. And if you ever try to put me on a pedestal again..." I will push you off it. Deal, Kale said. He kissed her. It was a kiss of promise. It tasted of apples and a future that they would write together, line by messy line. 6 months later, the Hall of Ascendance was full again, but this time, there were no gold-collared protocol officers. There were scientists, doctors, and diplomats from 1,000 worlds. Lyra stood at the podium. She wore a suit of deep violet, a nod to the color that had become the symbol of the revolution. She looked out at the sea of faces. Kyle stood in the front row, clapping. He was the first minister of the new republic now. He looked happy. Lyra cleared her throat. We are here today to sign the Galactic Immunity Accord, she began. She looked down at the document on the table. It was the blueprint for the coalition she had dreamed of in the Undercity, a network of shared knowledge, where immunity was a collective shield, not an imperial chain. She picked up the pen, but before she signed, she looked at the camera drone hovering nearby. She knew her story was being written into the history books at this very moment. They would write about the battles. They would write about the politics. But she wanted them to remember the truth. She leaned into the microphone. History will call this a miracle, Lyra said. But do not forget how it started. It started with a choice. She signed her name, Lyra Voss. The crowd erupted in applause. Kyle walked up the steps and stood beside her. He didn't overshadow her. He stood with her. They walked out onto the balcony together, looking out over a city that was rebuilding. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. It is a good ending, Kyle said softly. It is not an ending, Lyra corrected him, leaning her head on his shoulder. It is just part one of the real story. And somewhere in the archives of the New Republic, under the file marked Subject 0, the final entry of the old regime remained, a testament to the irony of fate. She drank the poison meant for the alien prince, then woke with immunity to everything.